Hi, this is Josh Apter from Manhattan Edit Workshop, and welcome once again to Sight, Sound, and Story. Tonight's event is, episode 32, behind the production of Masters of the Air. And most of the time when we do these events, we speak with a team of editors or cinematographers, but tonight we're mixing it up a little bit, and we're going to show more of the complete picture of how an incredibly detailed period piece like this comes together. So we are thrilled to welcome the director of photography, Jack Fitzgerald, Academy Award winning costume designer Colleen Atwood, and production designer Chris Seagers. It's a pretty amazing group. Moderating tonight's panel is going to be Will Mavity, co founder of Next Best Picture. And behind the scenes, I always have to thank our sponsors, AJA, ACE, Avid, and Filmmaker U. Now, I just want to take a little second to let you know about Filmmaker U, since you know the big names like AJA, ACE, and Avid. But if you can imagine amazingly high quality online classes with Academy Award winning editors, colorists, sound designers, VFX supervisors, that's what Filmmaker U does. So please check them out at filmmakeru.com. And last, I want to thank Manhattan Edit Workshop President Jason Banke, Director of Education Janet Dalton, for taking care of all the technical work, doing all the heavy lifting behind the scenes, and making my job the easiest one of all. So that's it. Sit back, relax, enjoy Sight, Sound, and Story behind the production of Masters of the Air.
Thank you, Josh, and welcome to Sight, Sound, and Story. I'm so happy to be talking about just this amazing visceral experience that is Masters of the Air. I know everyone's talking about the accuracy of what's going on and just how striking everything is visually across the board. So, I do want to talk to we're going to start with a question for everyone. We have Chris Seagers, who is our production designer for the series. We have Jack Fitzgerald, who is one of the DPs in the series, and we have Colleen Atwood, the costume designer for the series. Amazing, skilled crew of people going on here, and you all had to work very hard to nail the historical accuracy of a period where most of the people alive to experience it were no longer with us. So this is a follow-up to Band of Brothers. Years ago, Tom Hanks and team were able to talk to a lot of the people who were alive and consult with them. That's probably not something that everyone was able to do now. You had to rely on records, libraries, museums. So I'd love to hear one by one a little bit about the research and historicity, generally speaking, of trying to recreate an accurate World War II without really anyone to talk to this time. So I'll start with Chris about the production design, broadly speaking, some of this London airfield space, et cetera, et cetera. I think most of that's been knocked down and replaced with museums. So tell me a little bit about the research you had to do to recreate this world.
Well, our first port of call was obviously the Thorpe Abbots, which is where the whole series is based. That's to a certain it still exists. The tower still exists, and there's a small museum there that's been there since the Americans left the airfield. And that's been used for various things since then, for local community stuff. But there's a small museum there, and we went up there to have a look, and there was a line of probably 20 file cabinets, and we thought we were going into something that we could just go in and grab a hard drive and pull some stuff out, but it was just full of photographs, and it was incredible. There was a minefield of research there, and that's where we started it, and we kind of tapped into that. And there was one gentleman there who we really tapped into, who was a child when he was one of the kids in the series. And when we first went to see him, one of the first things he said is that when these planes first arrived, they'd never seen anything like this. They were like spaceships, because you were in the middle of East Anglia. Nothing happened there. You know, the entire community was revolved around farming, and it was a very dated farming. So when the Americans arrived, it was like, you know, it was amazing. So we wanted to try and tap into it to a lot of that as well. And so we got one of our team went in up to the museum, and we just started, you know, gathering photographs and drawings, and because we managed to find a lot of drawings and stuff that were based around the original camp. One of the biggest problems we found is that the camp was just the base was so big. And it's how we were going to do that, because you had airfield, you had the barracks, you had where all the admin was. It was over many acres, and that's what that's what I was saying before, is that it was important to try and get visual effects and everybody on the site, so we all knew where everybody was, to try and give it some geography, you know.
So you guys, as I understood it, you ultimately built a very large set. There was no, we're going to build one building and then redress it. You guys just built a big set. So how big are we talking?
And it was only a fraction, because when we first started, because it was such a big project, we started building before we had finite scripts. So we were building, not really knowing where we were going to go with this. So there was a lot of redressing going on also, but it was to try and also that although we had a pretty large budget, it was nowhere near enough that we could build everything. So we had to make everything work. The one set that we built for the barracks and the admin area, that was all the same set. We just kept redressing it and shooting it from different angles.
So, Colleen, obviously, you are no stranger to historical research and historical accuracy, but tell me a little bit about the process that you had to go into looking at archives of bomber jackets and the outfits that would have existed back then. Did you have people were there veterans that you were able to talk to, or was this basically really just having to go into archives, photos, documentation like that?
Well, the veterans didn't really know where their stuff came from per se, you know,
Fair.
they just got it. So that was a non-starter for me. So I went to people that had been, you know, doing military reproductions in order to produce the actual clothes, because they weren't out there. And then between collectors and buying things online, I got authentic jackets and the flight suits and all the different pieces, and then had them manufactured. So we had made the patterns. I was able to get some original fabric, and then found fabric actually still manufactured in the UK that was fairly close to what they actually used for kind of the dress uniforms, as well as the flight suits and all that gear. And then I purchased some reproduction stuff for deep background, because we had, you know, we fit thousands of people. So it was a combination of probably manufacturing 400 costumes or 500 costumes from the start, and then combining manufacturing and authentic reproductions.
And then Jack, to a degree, obviously, I think Adam Arkapaw shot the pilot episode, so you're playing a little bit with the aesthetic that he and Cary Fukunaga created. But I was curious, your collaboration with Adam, I know you've worked with him extensively. Looking at photos and videos of the era, tell me a little bit about kind of trying to recreate that look, that if I look into a photograph of the 1940s, you know, I'm going to be feeling this when I see what's on screen in Masters of the Air.
Yeah, I mean, the base was obviously, you know, well built before I began, and Adam and Cary had done a big research with Chris and with Colleen and other people to, get the look and feel of that right. The lighting options were limited in that we, definitely wanted to be true to practical lighting that was there at the time, and also the whole blackout situation that was a very real thing, and so using external lighting, night lighting, was also limited. Obviously we had to do what we needed to do, but when we were in environments that normally, in a street or something where you'd see lots of lighting from buildings and windows and such, we couldn't do that because in England that was blackout. So we'd have to close everything up and start again. The look, we did have a lot of photographs to go by, less so obviously real footage. There were, amazing documentarians that threw themselves in there with the soldiers and rigged cameras onto planes and flew around with them. So that was incredible and inspiring. And there was, I certainly, for episode 5, we were definitely following the trajectory that Adam and Carrie had set, but then being able to break out of it a little bit, because our episodes start to kind of push our characters more and more off base, and more out of the planes, certainly out of the planes in episode 6.
Well, it's nice that you mentioned going off base, because I want to start with a clip. We're going to spend most of our time talking about inside the planes and on the base, but we have a clip here that is not on the base.
Are you not coming in? Did you forget there were roommates?
Oh, yeah, I think I did, actually.
Subaltern, we've been scouring the college for you. An urgent message.
What is it?
I have to leave.
What, now?
Indeed. Next time you're in London, ring me. We'll go dancing. If you're lucky, I might even teach you to punt.
I hear it's all on the wrists. What about your things?
Oh, they'll send them.
That's not your bicycle.
Well, I'm borrowing it. Fortunes of war.
Don't you sleep?
After we win!
All right, so I like that clip because, as you mentioned, Jack, it's nice kind of to get out of the planes and off the airfield and into the broader world. So I would love to hear from each of you a little bit about that scene. Chris, we'll start with you. I assume there are places in England that still kind of look like that, but I'm guessing that there was a lot of building that had to be done to recreate a 1940s English street. So tell me a little bit about what you had to do for that environment.
Well, we're actually quite lucky, actually, because areas in Oxford and some of the cities, you can actually drop a camera and almost shoot. There's it literally looks like it did way back in the 30s and 40s. So obviously there was stuff we had to do, but it's pretty minimal compared to what we had to do elsewhere, because a lot of that does exist. It's usually lines in roads, it's street lights, and obviously if you're not turning the street lights on, it's even easier.
Yeah. Which I guess
it's because that was all done with available light, wasn't it, Jack?
Yeah, for me, that scene it was really beautiful for me to be in that environment and be like, as Chris said, this is all here. We don't have to touch it. It is gorgeous as it is, and apart from putting a few cars in there and a few bicycles to make it period appropriate, it's a beautiful environment. And it was also just one of those environments that we didn't have many other people. I feel like often in the show we were surrounded, because it's a military operation, you're often surrounded by many extras and many casts. So
and also it was historically correct, you know, as in you know, it did take place there.
Well, Jack, I know you didn't necessarily plan to start with that one, but we'll spend the rest of the time talking about the base and the planes. But this also gave an opportunity to talk about Belle Powley's character and what Colleen did for her, because I love her outfits, and there's also a blue outfit that she wears later in the show. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the outfits both in this scene and more broadly that Colleen created for Belle.
Well, Belle was, you know, she was in the in the British military, and she was a captain. So it was great. I created not only her uniform, but all the women's uniforms in the movie because they weren't in existence. So it was really interesting to be able to find the fabrics and make the both her uniforms and the American Red Cross uniforms and all the other women in the military who are sort of kind of historically underserved, I think, in movies, especially in their uniforms. Belle's blue costume she was sort of undercover in that phase, and I love that day. It was with Dee Rees, and we had it was London for France. She was in the underground, so the Nazis had occupied Paris. So we also, not only do we have Belle's blue thing that's her sort of spy outfit going into this so-called antique dealer that the art department did, but we also had, when she turned across the street, you saw the full Nazi, you know, hierarchy sitting at tables, drinking wine and enjoying themselves in the Paris, where the rest of the movie we've been, you know, in the intensity of the war around all of them at that place in time. So it was, you know, it was a great kind of fun for me to get to do something that was, like Jack pointed out and Chris both, that was outside the base, that was in the world, to do it, add another layer to the show, which I think both the art department and camera and all of us did in a really kind of fun way in the middle of London.
Well, let's jump into the actual airbase and some of the flights.
The hardest part of any mission was the anticipation, the waiting. No matter how well I plotted the routes or how thoroughly I briefed the other navigators, after wheels up, there was nothing I could do.
There's a couple reasons I love that clip. First off, Jack, I love that camera move you have where we're looking out the window and then you pull in slowly and we reveal the whole navigation spread right there. It's also kind of a good look at kind of the claustrophobic environment that Chris has created with these planes. So let's address the elephant in the room. Chris, you built planes from scratch. Tell me about that. That's insane.
Well, that was a combination of a company called BGI, which Stuart runs, and they built the actual planes, but we sort of worked together, you know, working out how we're going to break it all down, how we're going to shoot the damn thing, and working along with visual effects and special effects with the different rigs that we're going to. Again, we started all this, crikey, almost a year before we started shooting. So we had no idea. We had no DP, we had no directors. So we're just trying to work out how we're going to break this stuff down. So it was an interesting problem.
How big are these interiors we're looking at? Because they
that's
look
what I was going to
incredibly.
say. Is one of the things that blew me away were these were kids. They were like 17, 18-year-old guys who were coming over here, and they were stuck into a Coke can. The walls of those planes were no thicker than like a Coke can, because they had to be so light. It was and also they were flying at altitude that they'd never flown for at those sort of heights before. So that this was they were pushing technology. It was incredible stuff, and that was the whole part of the beginning, is that the guys just didn't know how to fly these planes, because when you were flying in Texas and places where they do all the training, they were beautiful blue skies, the weather conditions were perfect, and then you came to the UK where you were in fog, rain, cloud, and you had everything thrown at you. It was everything went against them, and the whole dynamic of the way these formations were going to work. They had to stay tight together, and they had to work in groups, which they didn't.
Well, so given the nature of filmmaking, there's a lot of stuff you have to fit inside your plane set there. You can work with people like Jack to make it seem more claustrophobic, but they're the size of a Coke can. I imagine your interior sets could not actually.
That was one of the biggest questions, because normally when you do this stuff, you then say, well, why don't we just go 10%? It just gives us a bit of space to move about. But we decided very early on that no, we should actually, because when you go on you cannot move inside these planes. And especially when you got all the gear on with all the straps and everything that's dangling, everything gets caught and stuck. But it's that trade-off of being accuracy, and also you've got to have practicality of making this thing work. But in the end, we decided to keep them. Also, once you start scaling things up a little bit, you have to scale everything up, and then it starts to get silly. So we opted not to do the scaling up, but we divided the plane in little sections, so we could, a bit like when you go to an airport and you see all those container things where they load the planes up. Well, we decided to do that, so you'd have the nose, the cockpit, the bomb bay, so that you would just drop them in as we needed them. You just segue them in and put them together, so you only need those two pieces, and then you only need those two pieces, and so we ended up doing it that way rather than doing it the other way.
Well, then, so Jack, when we are admittedly working in a very constrained space, even if it sounds like you had kind of a way in from the back, if they've split up these sets into segments, the camera remains pretty dynamic inside a very cramped set. How did you pull that off?
Well, for starters, we're using the Rialto, so we were able to not have such a large camera body, and use that, and have the operators and the grip team be able to work little rigs for the cameras. When I started with episode 5 on stage, and we actually, and even on location, when we realized what we were dealing with in terms of where we could physically put the cameras and operators and the actors, there became quite a radical rethink in terms of what shots could be achieved. We were because also thinking that, as Chris said, they didn't want to scale up the plane, so we were keeping to reality. But back in World War II, a lot of the people who were flying those planes were a lot smaller than our actors as well. So there was that not only were we working in incredibly tight spaces, but physically people are bigger. I mean, there were certain areas in the plane that I myself couldn't get into easily, like the tail gunner. My shoulders would hit side to side. Like,
Oh my God.
so you just realize that, they had to be very specific as well about which humans they put in which parts of the planes so that some people would fit and some people wouldn't. Camera wise, when we did our work on Block 5, we realized that we did want to build a lot more movement into our cameras, into our staging of our sets and our scene work. Block 1 had done a lot of rigs to get a lot of coverage very quickly, so they had a lot of hard mounts in there. And then we decided that we wanted to have the camera handheld a lot more and be able to create those movements. And not to say that Block 1 didn't, but we had little mini sliders and things going on. The grip team were incredible at finding the smallest rigs possible to mount the cameras on. But it was really like, the actor's wants to do this. Can we get a camera into that tiny little corner of the plane? And it was incredibly slow going in that it was basically one person in at a time, or, if you're lucky, two, where you'd send in one camera person and one grip person, or maybe it would just be one camera person and they'd do their things, and then the grip person would go in and do their thing, and then one lighting person would go in and do their thing. And then, so instead of it being a set where people could work around with each other and over top of each other to help each other through it, it was often the case where it would just be one or two people, and then you go out, you've had your 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 minutes and go. And so it was incredibly challenging in there. But
and for the actors as well, I mean, they had to be in these super hot clothes and with all the lights and all the up high in the rigs, which were already, toward the ceiling where the hot air rises. I mean, they were really troopers about it, and they were just couldn't wait to rip that stuff off at the end of
the irony that they're supposed to be playing it like it's freezing up there, right?
Yeah, it was freezing, and it was really hot. It happened to be
God.
When we were filming it, it was exceptionally hot for England, so they were really cooking up there in that gear.
Well, okay, so Colleen, I mean, that's a good segue. Throughout the course of the show, I guess the bomber jackets and the outfits develop. I was reading that you really you tried very hard to focus on the fact that there were material shortages at the time, and when the Americans first came over, we really didn't know what we were doing in terms of creating good jackets. So we just kind of took what the Brits had, and over time those developed. So broadly speaking, talk to me a little bit about the course you charted with some of these bomber jackets that all these guys are wearing, going from the kind of unsophisticated to what they grow into over the course of the show.
Well, it was really, as they developed, they copied the RAF jackets were their sort of starting point, because they were the shearling jackets that they wore. They were warm. The people in the back of the plane had zero heat. The people in the cockpit had some heat. So the guys in the back wore not only shearling jackets, but shearling pants in an early form of a thing called a heating suit that's underneath that we built, that actually plugged into the electrical system of the aircraft to keep them warm, because it was really, that was that dangerously cold. So we got a few real ones and copied them and evolved those, the sort of technology of that going on. We still incorporated using RAF pieces and bits in the beginning with the uniforms, like different. We had the Mae West that they used. The boots were different, and little pieces like that the people that were really, historically invested in this part of the war would like clock. And then as we got into the leather jackets that were just leather were very, they're very familiar to people. They've been around. But I found as the war effort geared up in America, it was a really fast trail. There wasn't just a military company that made these clothes. They were jobbed out. All kinds of manufacturers manufactured the jackets and the clothing for the military because it had to happen so quickly. So they repurposed for it. So you found jackets that were authentic from the era that were varied quite heavily because they were made in different parts of the country, the way they were made, the collars, little details. So I found one I really liked that felt a little bit earlier, like beginning of the war, and I sort of geared that for the early ones, and then the leather jackets later had a little bit different collar, which was more kind of toward more towards the 40s, less towards the late 30s. But it's little stuff that's just minutia that I knew about and my team knew about, but people really, some people will really be excited about it, while most people won't notice it. It's a different jacket.
Yeah, but that 1% who cares, who care about the authenticity will make a big stink online. So it's worth it.
Yeah, that can work two ways for sure. But the other thing is that for me, it really was important that the jackets didn't look new the whole show, and it was a really huge job to age this stuff. I mean, we aged it over and over and over again. I literally sheared the jackets like you shear sheeps to get the wool coated down and stuff. So it was a lot of little details like that within the world of the jackets that was a challenge, both a challenge and a lot of fun.
There's one shot towards the end of this clip that is it's back on base and it's inside the mess. And I'd love to hear from both Chris and Jack about this mess hall. It's very gloomy the way it's lit. So that's a set you built from the ground up, Chris?
Yes. Or the whole base was built. It was literally an empty field when we arrived, and we constructed everything. So,
well, Jack, tell me a little bit about kind of creating the light in that space. It's very gloomy. You can tell he's alone as he's narrating kind of the stoic challenge he's facing.
Well, because it was England and it is quite often gloomy, that we, and which is beautiful to shoot actually as well. But there are other scenes in that mess hall where the sun is pouring in, and it's a different vibe. I was particularly happy on that moment because Crosby was so reflecting that he was the one that was not up there in the plains, and that he was down at base. There's nothing I can do now. I was very grateful for that kind of gloominess to set the tone of that world, of that dialogue, and because also things, and it's not necessarily in that moment, but having the overheads playing, again, they're authentic, they're real to the time, but often we were in situations where it was like, okay, these boys would have been doing this at 5 o'clock in the morning and the light is just starting to break. So again, often in different parts of the base, we would have the light just hinting in, but be using the practical lights to fill out the space. And that was something that Adam, was really wanting to play on, is having the two different, color temperatures going and just playing into that world. And so we opened the curtains as much as we could. Again, it was that thing of like, if all the lights are on, then we have to have the curtains closed. So let's play the edge of darkness as much as we can.
We actually did that a lot in the earlier ones. That when we did all the equipment room, and we were mixing the fluorescent lights with the condensate lights, and it was just to try and get that whole mix. It was,
which can famously look unappealing. So that's
yes. Well, it was. Then the whole thing was supposed to be a little bit jarring. You know, it was because the guys are all going getting fitted up with all their suits and everything. It must have been a pretty harrowing experience.
Cannot imagine.
Number 3's on fire! Shutting off gas and feathering! We're fine! We're maintaining speed! Yeah, just. We can make it to the target. Approximately 1 minute to bomb release. Rocket 2 o'clock! Lead pilot to nose! What's going on down there? We got bombs to drop! Have on! Have on! They're coming in for another run at us! Make those... Hey! Right! Engine 4's done! We're down to 1 engine! I'm almost hit bad! Engine 2 is going on us. She's pulling already. It's gonna be hard to keep her level. We gotta leave formation! 7 bombs now! Hit the bailout valve! Elbow the ball! We're bailing! Elbow the ball! Destroy the bomb site! Shoot it! I can't hold her steady much longer! Hang in there, Hambo! Help me! Get my parachute! Pilot to navigator. Noted in the log, squad leader Egan leaving formation. Roger that. Crookshank moving into lead position. Copy. Navigator to pilot. Major Egan is falling fast. Looks like they're preparing to bail. Let's go! We gotta get out of here now! Hey, give me a hand! Petrus, let's go! He should be buried! We have to get Harry down. George, come on, damn it! He's dead! We gotta get out of here, now! Let's go! There they go! They're all out! Let's get off this dump! Go! You go! Brady, I'm the senior officer now. Jump! It's my ship. You jump! Out! All right! I'll see you, John!
I'm terrified of heights, and that consistently freaks me out to watch. You know, you have a wonderful VFX team on here, but this show is obviously a collaboration between the practical and the visual effects. So tell me a little bit about. I think I read you guys you used volume maybe as opposed to green screen. So talk to me a little bit about the shooting sequences that have basically people about to jump out of a plane without actually having them jump out of a plane in the middle of the sky.
A lot of that work was on the volume. There was some green screen work, as Chris said before. We did section off the plane often, so the waist was in a different stage that only had volume walls on one side of it, and often we didn't have the assets that we needed to really be visually true to where the enemy planes were and where the other planes were side by side. So there was obviously a ton of work that showed the screen, but not all of it. We, in terms of getting the boys out of the plane, that was all second unit.
You didn't
so
jump out of a plane?
I didn't jump out of the plane, and I didn't shoot any of that work, actually. I mean, we did do stuff in the Bombays when the doors opened and have our guys in there, but in terms of the physical jumping, but they did hoist. Is this right, Chris? They did hoist the Bombay up into a crane and then had them jump.
Yeah, we had the plane suspended on a 300-ton crane. And we did a lot of bomb dropping, people jumping out of them. It was used for a lot of different sequences. The funniest thing with that, though, what happened is that we had to be so careful because the planes were so aerodynamic, and the wind speed on the airfield, when we could only lift it up if the winds didn't get too, because the plane would try and lift. And we were worried it was going to pull the crane over because these planes, because we built them from the original Boeing drawings, so that they could fly, and but it was interesting, you know. So we when Neil Corbell built he designed the engineering for them, so we had pick points that we could pick it and literally hang it, probably about 50 foot in the air, wasn't it? It was quite high. It was probably more than that, probably 100 feet in the air, quite a lot.
Colleen, there's the costumes in this sequence also play a big role because a lot of the suspense in this scene hinges on one of the characters being stuck in here. And also throughout, we see, you mentioned the shearing, but a lot of the different ways these outfits get distressed. There's blood splattered all over them. And, there's going to be wear and tear from things like the hook of your jacket getting caught on a piece of a plane and ripping off. So tell me a little bit about the distressing that you had to do to the outfits in a sequence like this.
Well, we pre-distressed most of them. Then when we knew the specific action, then we do tears. And also they had things on them that were caused from called flak damage. So little pieces of metal, when the planes got shot into, would kind of sizzle onto the jackets. So we had little burn marks and little nicks and things like that. It helped add textural work to the jackets, which the camera picks up occasionally. I mean, I gotta say, just looking at this sequence, like as a civilian point of view, I'm at the edge of my seat. I can't believe how Jack shot it, how they cut it together. It's just like,
very well.
For something that you work on, like, you don't realize what camera is doing sometimes when they're doing, that stuff so segmented, and that it all fits together so seamlessly with or without special effects. That camera sequence and the use of the inside of the plane from them it's my favorite one in the whole movie, but it's really, really something special. I forget it. the clothes are fine. They do their thing. They all have on all their gear, and you get to see it. But the actual way that Jack shot it is pretty incredible. I think it was like amazing.
Oh,
but I love in that sequence, or when the explosion happens in the nose and he gets blown back, and there's all that black smoke for a second, and you do feel it like it got embedded into his clothing and his skin and his hair. In that moment, he's quite a different looking character that
sure.
explosion and afterwards.
Jack, were you did you work with the VFX team in the aftermath at all? Because there's some really striking shots. I know you said second unit shot some of the aerial footage, but like there's this incredible shot of one of the characters falling, and you basically see part of the jet stream whip in front of him. Really striking shot. Were you involved at all in kind of honing in those images with the VFX team afterwards?
No, Anna and Ryan were very specific. We had a lot of that sequence prevised, storyboarded and such. Stephen Rosenbaum, our VFX guru, master, he added layer upon layer upon layer in post, and it, a lot of it was surprising to me to see, in the final edits, how many things he had added along the way to give life to each and every shot. So often that was his own. If it hadn't already been discussed, it was often his, tweaking of frames and tweaking of shots.
Colleen, I promise you I'd let you talk about the white camel jacket. So why don't you tell me about that one?
Well, that comes from real, that's a real thing that Egan did. He went to the equipment hut where he was when he was first assigned to get his pilot's clothing, and there was this odd white sheep that hadn't had a layer of tanning on it, and he chose that for some reason. It spoke to him. So it was Egan's famous jacket that was a joke between him and Clevin, because Clevin always said, and this is from the book, that you'd be the biggest target, in the sky. So so we had that specially made and then knocked down for. Of course, we got the whitest jacket on the biggest actor, because Callum was like 6'3" and like broad shoulders, and so you really it couldn't be like gilding the lily any more than it was. So it was a fun thing. It was a little different manufacturing process, but I actually found a real one that Gary Eastman in England, who made a lot of my stuff for me, had, and I borrowed his and took my pattern off it, and then sourced the skins and used his pattern to blow up a few sizes for Callum, but in order to make it so it was sort of an accurate replica of what that jacket would have been. The jacket I had wasn't Egan's, but there were a few of them out there in the world. So that was a really lucky find and a very rare piece of history to be able to kind of get. Good to see everybody. And thank you very much.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you guys.
Nice to see
Wonderful
you
to hear
guys.
about your work in the show.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Again, I'm Josh Apter from Manhattan Edit Workshop. Please stay tuned for more Sight, Sound, and Story events coming soon. We promise, pretty regularly, actually, about every month. One last time, a heartfelt thanks to AJA, ACE, Avid, Filmmaker U, Jason Banky, and Janet Dalton, without whom none of this would be possible. Believe me. Have a great night. We'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career. getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.